Good morning or afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. This is Tracy Brown again, and we're at part 3 of our discussion about our relationship with fullness. So, in the first video, which is done less than a week ago back, so probably 4 or 5 days if you want to go check that out, what I speak about is just this idea that fear of fullness or having a hard time not knowing where your fullness is and accidentally overriding it is they're both kind of ends of the spectrum, but they all have their meaning. And so yesterday we talked about like fear of fullness and what that means. So I'm hoping those who have already watched that one have taken some notes. If you haven't watched that one yet and you're not for sure if it's for you, I would go ahead and watch it anyway, just so you can see if there's some parts of you that still feel fear normal fullness. I'm not talking about like just gentle, what we're talking about here is gentle, normal fullness of being fearful of. That's what yesterday's video was about. Now today's video is going to be for those of you who have a really hard time stopping when you're full. And so there's several reasons for that, and we're going to talk about some of those today. And I'm going to give you one tip if that's something you're really struggling with, especially if you're somebody who either just really unconsciously overrides comfortable fullness a lot, or you don't even notice it. So it can be conscious or unconscious that you're moving your way past fullness. So if you're watching this and it doesn't feel like your issue, I still encourage you to watch it, just because you'll learn a lot of things about what actual numbing out with fullness is versus getting to just getting full and knowing that you're not out of control. Okay, so again, today's video especially is going to be helpful for people who have a hard time stopping when they're full. And the reason that's going to happen, we have to think about first deprivation. You always have to go to all disordered eating, all chronic dieting has a root in restriction. Either food restriction, like the kinds of foods, the variety of foods you might like. It has a root in restriction of you want to eat certain things, but you feel guilty for doing it, so you try to avoid it. There's a root in there of, obviously just not eating enough. So even if you're a person who doesn't identify with being a dieter, if you have times that you try to just shave off the edges of eating enough, you're probably going to have some times where it feels like it's hard to stop when you're comfortably full. And when I'm saying comfortably full, that means I'm good, I'm done. I won't be hungry anywhere between 3 to 4 hours, or like good and full, like you feel some pressure, which means I won't be hungry maybe for 5 or 6. That's enough food to last a while. Those places, those physical sensations are not too much food. That's a normal fullness. That's something that I hope everybody who watches this aspires to be comfortable with, because we want food to fuel our lives and give us pleasure and work for us, versus being the thing that we tiptoe around and stay scared of. All right. So if you're watching this, you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, I don't really, do I have some diet thinking? Totally. Do I wish I could lose weight? Yes. All right. So those two things really right there have to get your attention, because those two things are enough, whether you restrict your food intake or not. If you feel like you should, or you feel like you don't deserve something, or you feel like you can't have cookies for dinner because you had some candy at lunch, if you are having those thoughts or feelings, that restrictive thinking is enough to cause a binge. I had years, and I needed to do a video about this, which I will, around, I spent 4 years in this cycle. So I know what it's like to even have deprivation-driven thinking to cause feeling like I was out of control with eating. And it wasn't because I was food restricting that much or even at all. It was purely out of the restrictive mindset of saying something negative about myself, about what my worth was based on food, and it was enough to get me to feel out of control around eating. So if you are listening to this and you're getting really, really full off of food that you don't let yourself have enough of, or when you want to, or very often, it's because of either actual past calorie restriction, or it's going to be out of telling yourself that, like, well, tomorrow I'll be good, or I can only have one serving of XYZ food that has sugar or fat or whatever in a day, that's enough to cause like us to want to eat just in case. I call it just in case eating, meaning, I'm gonna eat a few more bites or a few more even handfuls enough of something to where, okay, now I'm really uncomfortable. I can't eat any more of this. And oh man, what just happened? I didn't want to eat any more of that. I was done, but I was afraid. There was a little bit of fear in there that I'm not going to have this for a while, so I better get it while I can. So right there, it's the fear of being deprived. It's scary. It feels humiliating. I mean, people don't always think of that phrase humiliating, but it is humiliating to tell yourself that you can't have cookies if you want to have cookies. It's just like being a little kid and being shamed. We're going to either collapse, have a nervous system collapse of feeling like, okay, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I can't have what I want, or we're going to have a rebellion, which causes more eating. And so that stuff's really real. So tip number one, I want you to be watching out for that kind of thinking. See if you can observe that and see where it shows up. Number two is that we're having this kind of numbness in our systems, like this, not total collapse or disassociation, but we're having this like, I don't really know where I am in my day. I'm kind of checked out. I'm not fully present. And, then I might notice I'm getting stressed out about something. My system then feels kind of revved up. And then I go to eat to like push that down. That can be a place where we catch ourselves accidentally bypassing some more comfortable signals of fullness. And we find ourselves, if you don't have my hunger scale, I'm going to put it below. We might find ourselves in like 9 or 10 land, which is I'm eating till I'm really pretty uncomfortable, or I'm eating to a 10 where I'm like so gorged that I feel terrible. And we might be doing that consciously or unconsciously. I'll talk about that in a second. I'll give an example of that. So if you find yourself that you're just feeling like you're in this phase of wherever you're at in your life and you're feeling just not quite all that checked in, and it's easy to override your signals, the simplest thing I can say to that is, how can you remind yourself to check in more often? And I'll let that be something you think about. The other place where it feels kind of not all that conscious or even unconscious, where you are eating and you notice hunger, but then the more you start to eat, the more then you start to check out. And you'll recognize that seems to have a purpose and a function that you want to get more clear about. Like, okay, wait a minute, can I wake myself up enough to recognize what I'm doing? And we'll talk about one thing I'm going to suggest you do for that in here in a second. But if you can recognize that that's your pattern, like I tend to like lose track of myself. Like I don't even know where like I am sitting in this chair right now, or I kind of like lose track of who's around me, or I kind of am zoning out. If you can notice that you do that, that's a huge step to ending that cycle, getting really overly full on a daily basis or on a really consistent basis. The other thing I want to say is I know that there are people, because I've sat in many a session with people, helping them track what's happening and what the function of eating past comfortable fullness is, and they're quite clear. Like, this is how I deal with my lack of internal self-soothing. I've been depressed since I was a kid, and this is what I do when things get really bad, is that I would eat, and it would help me feel something other than this heaviness, this internal heaviness, and I would feel, there were times where it would feel like it would be kind of an internal hug of warmth and of something there for me, and then it would sometimes progress to, I'm in a lot of pain, but at least I feel at least I know where this is coming from. It makes sense to me. And if that's happening for you, then I highly encourage you to, give me a call. Let's work on that and figure out some other ways to build more safety in your system. That way, you have other strategies besides, this is the only way that I feel something that has meaning and that I have memory of. So we're going to talk about that. And so rounding all this back up, so whether you're eating past comfortable fullness is just, not enough practice with being present with your eating, that takes time, just keep checking in more often. If it's some diet mentality still left in there of, I really don't think I should be eating 2 servings of cookies a day and that makes me eat past comfortable fullness. Diet mentality stuff is super important to, and desire to lose weight is super important to identify first, and then you can go into some more of the emotional meanings of things. So I'll leave this lastly, is that if you're finding yourself being a person who is kind of getting checked out around your eating, I need you to stand up more often. Like literally, if you're finding, especially if you're a person who, like me, sits a lot and, sits a lot and types and thinks and reads and talks, I would suggest that you set an alarm and get up and just, this is not exercise. This is not even trying to get you to be gentle movement. So don't put that aside. To get up and stand up, because sometimes that'll just give you enough. And there's other things that, for people who are struggling with kind of consistently overeating and overriding comfortable fullness, and or even doing some kind of like just kind of very habitual eating when any sense of non-fullness is there. I have lots of exercises for people to do, but one of them would be, can you stand up more often? Just stand up, feel your feet on the ground. If helping just like moving your arms a little bit like in a stretch would be helpful, something like that. But we want to juice up the part of your nervous system that's actually kind of hanging out in this functional freeze a lot. And so if you identify with that, just stand up more often if you're feeling kind of frozen. Now, this isn't going to be as good for people who use hyperactivity to run away from get away from feelings, or to try to manage your anxiety, because you're always moving. You're already up, and more standing up is not going to help you that much. We need to help bring you down. But if you're a person that notices like, yeah, I can just sit for hours and read and think, and it kind of the inertia is something that I'm struggling with, then we need to have you stand up more often. Okay? If you're having the opposite thing, video 2 is more for you. Or if you're somebody who flip-flops, which I think most of us get into some kind of pattern of like, for a while here, I'm in like hyper mode and I'm not that connected. And I'm not as connected with my hunger and fullness. Or I don't allow myself to get as full. That video is for you. If you're more on this end of the spectrum of, oh, I override comfortable fullness a lot, I don't know where the edges are, then this video is more for you. So I hope this series was helpful for you to start to understand like what the function of all this stuff is, just on a very surface. Now, all these topics I can go 10 to 100 times more in depth with, and I do, and I've done it in some other videos. I definitely do it in my one-on-one stuff and in my self-study. So if you're interested in any of those doorways to more in-depth personal work for you, message me, call me, whatever, and we'll talk about like what I see would be helpful to you to get started with as quickly as possible. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video series. I'm always open to getting your feedback about how helpful or not they were, what other topics you want to go more in depth with. But let me know, and message me or tag me below, and we will keep on going with it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.